We'll start off the program in Nigeria, where the PDP, in a statement by its National Publicity Secretary, Dapo Nagba, on Thursday declared that the party remains united and firmly on the ground in Rivers State and other parts of the country despite the challenges. Now, the crisis rocking the Rivers State House of Assembly took a new turn on December 11th, 2023, with 27 members defecting from the ruling People's Democratic Party in the state to the All Progressives Congress, APC. A few days after their defection, two of the lawmakers quietly returned to the PDP. And of course, ever since, there's been a follow-up as regards the political impasse in the state. And today, we will, of course, be talking about all of the drama. Now, Festus Ogwuche, legal practitioner and expert in international human rights law, joins me on the program from Port Harcourt, Rivers State. Thank you so much for your time, Festus.
Yes, thank you very much, Dapo.
All right, now,
thanks for inviting.
Great. I would like to start off the conversation right now with a statement by the former governor of Jigawa State, who actually, well, I say in the context of those words, sort of lambasted the PDP, that's the People's Democratic Party, in person of Lamido Sanusi. Now, in his words, he said, how come their total absence in the saga playing out in the PDP family in Rivers State? Is it the docility of the leadership of the People's Democratic Party so comatose to the extent that President Bola Ahmed Tinubu of the APC, our sworn rival and opponent, is now the grand patriarch of the People's Democratic Party? I mean, he said quite a number of things, but how do you react to this particular line?
I will say that the PDP is not living up to its responsibility as a political party, and being like it's not very much concerned about what's going on in Rivers State tells me that there are so many things wrong with the political party. Lamido Sanusi is not very much out of the way in his assessment of the political party, being that it has not featured very prominently, as it should be, in the course of all this imbroglio that is going on in Rivers State. And it's quite unfortunate. One would have expected that PDP would be very active in it, being a political party where that's almost losing 28 or thereabout 25 of its members who were elected under its umbrella, pursuant to its mandate, and whose governor is getting all the battering that you can think of from left, right, and center, even from the center in Lagos, and suffering every manner of intimidation and harassment. The PDP, I expected, should have rallied around the governor and done some things within its internal structure to put some people in their rightful positions and ensure that its membership is not left bare with little or no protection, particularly the person of the governor. Nothing much has happened in that area, and I think the blame should be on the head of the PDP. And I totally and completely agree with Sanusi on that point.
Now, I mean, still staying on some of the things he said, another aspect of, his particular statement has it that it is inconceivable that a political party will simply sit back and allow its fortunes be taken over by a rapacious scavenger, that's the APC, which President Bola Ahmed Tinubu did in the so-called peace meeting, is not brokering peace, in Rivers State, but according to him, using his office to enhance the fortunes of his political party. Now, what's your take generally as regards the peace talks that happened between the president and, of course, the warring factions, in the PDP of Rivers State?
Yes, I think you've captured it quite succinctly. And I expected that the president, in coming into the conflict to look for ways of settling it, ought to have carried the political party under which the governor was elected along. It's not purely a thing between the president and the governor. There are very lean circumstances, very narrow circumstances where the president can interfere or interact with the governor at that level without the input of the political party. Now that he has done that, well, they say there's a great deal, there's an agreement, and we're beginning to question the legality of that agreement. What is important is not just that the agreement, as the governor has said, that well, no sacrifice is too much to be paid for peace. But the important thing is that should it be an agreement between the governor, and those who put him into political office? Is he carrying the people of Rivers State along? That's the most important question. In other words, would you say that the people of Rivers State are bound by that agreement? I don't think they are bound by the agreement. Will you say that the agreement is in consonance with the Constitution? They did meet the standards of Chapter 2 relating to the fundamental objectives and directive principles of state policy? I say no. Will you consider the agreement as a charter of government? The answer is no again. Will you say it has brought some social contract principles that could be binding on the people of Rivers State in such manner that the running of state affairs, the running of the government of the people, of which they have that sovereignty donated to them by virtue of the Constitution, is valid and proper? The answer is again no. I don't think that agreement is one that can be enforced on anybody. And being that it is not binding on the people of Rivers State, because if it should be binding at all, if at all we are saying, let us keep the Constitution in abeyance and let us bring in the agreement to ensure that at least it has a workable presence amongst the people and the course of governance in the state, then of course there must be a referendum, a plebiscite sort of, to get the will of the people, the expression of that will.
I'm sorry, I will just need to wade in here, talking about, you used the phrase, the legality of the agreement. Now, some would say that the president actually was even invited to intervene. Yes, it might not be within his constitutional powers to sort of dabble in quote and unquote state affairs, particularly when it's more of a party matter, right? But some people have said that the reason why the president needed to wade in was when it looked like nothing was happening at state level, right? Hence the need for a higher, well, I call it power right now. And then we saw the intervention of Mr. President, and to some extent, maybe the ship is pretty much steady. So wouldn't you also want to look at it from that angle too?
Yes, I looked at it from every angle when I got to the conclusion that the president had no business coming into that matter at that critical time. What he ought to have done as the president is to rally around the members of the political party at the National Assembly who are within his, to some extent, at least they give him some attention and get them to wade into the matter, elder statesmen from the states and members of the political party, and maybe use his own political platform to reach out to the members of the other political party to see how people can now come in to look for a way to harmonize on the raging controversy that was on the ground. They just came in unilaterally like a bomb, and his presence defined a whole lot of things, including that agreement, which some persons are saying that it was done under some sort of ambience of siege, so to speak, and it may not bringing in the peace platform on that controversy, but trying to see how he can reap the benefits for his own political party. That is how some persons may look at it. But because, I mean, these are political parties that are parallel to each other in ideology, in the implementation of party policy and goals. I would say that the president played a good role, at least to that extent, to ensure that there's peace in that state. But the manner of his coming in is quite, I find a little bit questionable.
So is it okay to say that the protest that happened in Rivers State, as a result of as a fallout of the peace talks or peace agreement or peace meeting that happened between the president and the warring parties, actually was necessary?
I will not ascribe to people going on the streets on a very sensitive matter of that nature. Things are still on the table, the cards are still on the table, and for all the political gladiators to pick and choose the direction that it will take. The PDP political party is still just coming out, bearing its fangs at a time that I would say has become a little bit late. The members of the National Assembly from Rivers State are yet to come into it. And then we still have that gap between the government and the governor and the people, which needs to be bridged. And I think that these things can be discussed to a large extent comprehensively by all the stakeholders and all the interested parties before the people go on the streets and begin to demonstrate. But then, like I told you, the validity of that agreement is questionable, and unless until you get the expression of the will of the people by way of a referendum, they tell us that a referendum is not part of our constitution, and so we cannot implement it. But the Supreme Court has said rightly in a DSS against Adegboye that you wouldn't expect the constitution to spell out everything. A referendum or plebiscite, the conduct of referendum and plebiscites are in consonance with traditional democratic traditions and constitutional principles. So you don't necessarily have to have referendum written black and white in the constitution before you apply it. When it comes to matters of this nature, the will of the people must be expressed. But then you look at it from the point of view of the instruments, the constitutionality of the clauses of that agreement. I took my time to look at it. I don't think there's any consistency between that document and what is provided in the Constitution. And it's like an aberration, though. And some persons have said it's akin to a coup d'etat. I would not want to use that kind of strong language on it. But then it brings up a lot of things about the misfortunes of this grandfatherism that has become an injected principle in our political environment. And I think, and I rightly say so, that it's an issue that raises a lot of issues regarding the legitimacy of our democratic process, the effectiveness of the process, and the sincerity of the political actors, particularly those we put in political offices, in defining what the essence of politics and democracy is all about against the backdrop of our constitutional principles that should guide the tenets and tenor of governance in Nigeria.
All right, now let's look at the persons of the current governor, that's Fubara, and of course Wike, that's Wike, the former governor, and the current minister of the FCT, who of course are the warring parties. How would you say all of this drama that has unfolded has impacted on their political popularity and also influence? At the state level, that is.
That's a good question, Dapo. If you're talking about popularity and political influence, we go back to the elections that propped them out, the governor, and which brought in Tinubu, and later upon which Wike became the minister of the FCT. I would say that it's not a matter of popularity; it's more of bronze. We know the circumstances surrounding the emergence of Fubara. If he's getting popular support now on the basis of the controversy that's going on, it's the later effect of the level of intimidation and the level of embarrassment the members of the public here in Rivers State is getting. And of course, the overbearing attitude of the former governor, who people think that is a little too draconian and tyrannical in his manners and tendencies. The fact of the controversy brings up a whole lot of things on the level of participation of the people in the democratic system, particularly in the elections. That if there's a strong nexus between the people of Rivers State and Governor Fubara in terms of the manner of his emergence, that he got their votes totally and completely, this issue could not have arisen. And I'm sure he will not do anything in abeyance of the people without involving them, without indulging their expressions or seeking their support and mandate. Of course, it will affect the popularity of the two very, very seriously, because you cannot leave one out of the other. If you're giving a good some credit to the governor, of course, you look at it at the backdrop of him being the very person who was chosen by him, single-handedly brought by him. I'm not misquoting anybody, but Wike had even painted a picture of how he emerged, and it doesn't have anything to do with the number of votes cast for him or whatever. We know what elections are in this state, and so long as we begin to play around with the mandate of the people, the whole essence of the electoral process, the whole essence of the democratic process, the importance of elections, of popular ballots, the conferment of legitimacy on this authority. You will not say that godfatherism can be kissed goodbye, or that we are going to see less of these kind of activities within states. Of course, it's not only Rivers State, it's not peculiar to Rivers State alone. A whole lot has happened in some other states, and much more are happening on the conflict between godfathers and godsons, and the political elevation of persons who are not fit and proper for political offices through the back door, which is very, very unfortunate.
All right. I mean, a follow-up to that will be, what do you see becoming of the political future of the current governor, Sim Fubara, particularly this administration, and maybe the probability of a second term, knowing fully well that part of the, what I call it, items on that agreement had it that the 27 lawmakers who defected be called back to the House, their seats not declared vacant. And we know that 27 are loyal to the former governor, that's Wike. And I mean, navigating, some have described Fubara's situation as a sheep, dancing around wolves. So what do you see becoming, of his government in the next 4 years, maybe 8 years, particularly his political future and administration?
Somebody described him as as a person who finds himself trapped between the deep blue sea and the Frankenstein monster. I think there's no better description of what he is, and he's found himself ensconced in between very strong political bigwigs on both sides of the political divide and the presidency. He also appears to be somebody who can easily be harassed and intimidated. Wike was in that office before him. We knew the running battles he had with Buhari, and we also think that to the extent that I understand, that he may not be able to pull in the reins of political office or political power. His only option is to be on the side of the people. Be on the side of the people could help him, hoping also that in the course of time, the electoral principles will apply and elections will be properly reformed and credible elections could be possible. All he needs may not be the support of these big giants to necessarily have to be the people. We expect that in the next round of elections to be free, fair, credible, transparent, to the extent that the godfatherism can be buried once and for all, if that can be possible. But going by the way it is, if the status quo is to remain the way it is, of course, it doesn't stand any chance, because at the end of the day, Wike has a very good, strong roots in the political machinery of the state here, and having taken this course to unearth some of these things that they did, some which they did clandestinely and which should have been hidden in the backwoods of their minds, and having exposed him in this manner, I don't think he'll get any endorsement of Wike. But then if you have a very transparent electoral process, does he need the endorsement of Wike to remain on stream? He doesn't need it. Wike only has one vote, and that's what we are looking for, that the power be given to the people, that the people be allowed to exercise their franchise and sovereignty and their votes count.
It's easy. It's easy to say that, power be given to the people and of course, people being allowed to, exercise franchise. But let's also look at the process, particularly in Nigeria, of electing leaders, the process of our democracy. Part of the questions being raised is how expensive it is to run for office, how expensive it is to pull off elections. We know that some political parties, the forms alone, can finance maybe the building of a house or a school, in some local government area somewhere in the country, right? So you look at the resources involved and all of the logistics, and then you ask, is it possible to produce a candidate that will be solely responsible to the people, given the mechanisms, the infrastructure, and also the structure on ground, such that at the end of the day, that candidate would not feel tied or will not remain tied to the apron strings of a sponsor or a godfather?
Yes, you've raised a very vital issue here, and it is quite deep. and we look at it from the point of view of these issues that you raised, these factors that you reeled out, the expensive nature in running for elections in this country, the cost of electoral forms. The basic question is, are these constitutional? To the very best of my knowledge, if we find if the courts are performing at the optimum level, some of these issues that pertain to the expensive nature of running for elections or have participated in the electoral process are in nullity. The African Charter on Human and People's Rights in Article 13 guarantees the right of individuals to participate in the electoral process, either directly or indirectly. Directly as an active person seeking for political office, and indirectly as somebody who will exercise his franchise by voting for a particular candidate. And there's been a lot of decisions across the world, from Canada to the United States, that the forms for purchase, the process for making yourself a candidate should be as less expensive as possible, should be affordable to the average civil servant, the minimum should be as minimal as possible. But then we have a system here in Nigeria where it is the rich that can only vie for political office. You cannot talk about purchasing a form. I think in one of the political parties, the cost of buying a nomination form was almost up to 100 million naira. Mm-hmm. And that means that you're segregating or you're restricting persons from participating in the process. And that is totally, completely unconstitutional. In this wise, I think that the courts must try to be as active as possible, because the best leaders you find in the world come from the lower rungs of the political demography, or the social demography, the poor, Mahatma Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, Abraham Lincoln. You know, they are not people from rich homes. And you find the best leaders from there. If you create a technocratic system where it is only the rich that can buy, then it is totally unconstitutional. In every ramification of the Constitution, in every ramification of fundamental rights, both domestic rights and international human rights, the power, the right for the individual to participate in the electoral process is a basic right. It is inalienable, and there's no way we can use legislation to upturn it. The only thing we are praying is that we have a judicial system that lives up to its expectations and lives up to its responsibilities, that will not allow pronouncements that will keep some of these things at bay, some of these policies from political parties, political bigwigs, looking at electoral processes as a way of making money, of getting as much wealth as possible. The poorest man in Nigeria has the right to participate, to vie for the presidency of the land. And you may be surprised that it will turn out to be the best you can think of. If you have a system of governance that is being run by aristocrats.
So are you saying a solution has to be more, the solution to this has to be more of institutionals, an institutional approach than maybe at the level of political parties or individuals? Because some have also said that why not introduce scenarios like independent candidates where you are not running on any platform, you're just running based on your own personal identity.
Yes, I was coming to that, the issue of independent candidature. And anything that discriminates between the poor and the rich is unconstitutional. I hope you agree with me on that. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
If you tend to sideline a particular political demography, population of people from participating in the process on the simple reason that they could not afford the nomination fees, the monies they have to pay to get through the electoral process. Of course, we don't need to look through the books to know that it is unconstitutional. But since this thing has started, there hasn't been any judicial pronouncements on that. I filed a suit at the Federal High Court on that. It's still pending. But then the things that are going on are things that are totally and completely unacceptable. I think for this long period that you've been on this political journey, this democratic journey, is enough for us to learn some lessons about the electoral process, about democratic traditions, about constitutional principles regarding, the need to harmonize everything in line with the global standards in terms of practice, in terms of demonstration of what values you have in our political system. You talked about strengthening the institutions. It's not just strengthening the institutions alone. I expected that some moves ought to have been made by now to ensure that political parties abide by the provisions of the Constitution in the running of, not just in the running of their own affairs, but in their intra-political essence and their internal political process. To ensure that there's a level playing field, a level playing ground for everybody to participate in the electoral process, and it's not just for the rich. And that is how this society has become so segmented to one direction, that they have the notion that only the rich can vie for political office, which is not the case here.
All right,
once you put that as a tradition, sorry, Dapo, then of course you've set a very dangerous path for the democratic process, because at the end of the day, you have a lot of enthronement of mediocres and persons who do not have any interest whatsoever in the political system, except for ways to get money and enrich themselves privately, and not necessarily for the general interest of the public.
All right, just before I let you go, there are talks that maybe the governor, that's the current governor of Rivers State, might just maybe cave into all of the pressure and maybe defect to the ruling party, that's the APC. Do you see that happening in the coming weeks?
Well, like I told you, the manner of his emergence from as governor is not one that is rooted strongly in legitimacy or populism. And that's why he's quite a lucky guy that is getting quite a lot of support from the members of the public here, who now see him as a crying baby who needs to be supported and needs to be protected. It's not the case of him caving in. If he caves in without getting the indulgence of the people, the support of the people, what effect would that caving in be? I think it's gotten to a stage where you have to put a full final stop to this issue of godfatherism and to the issue of intimidation by the political elites, one of the other. That so long as you're in the center and you're part of the center, you can do anything anyhow with any governor, any chief executive within the component units, and that goes for that. Somebody thought, say the other day, I saw it on one radio broadcast, I heard it on one radio broadcast, that they could use the EFCC against him, they could use any of the law enforcement authorities against him. Then if that becomes the case, then we have a wobbly political and democratic system that cannot stand the test of time. It's not just him caving in. Will it be legitimate? Will it be proper? As far as I'm concerned, that agreement is a worthless piece of document. It belongs to nowhere but to the doldrums. And to the extent that I understand, what else is economic and financial crimes than people sitting in and going into clandestine agreements, clandestine arrangements with state chief executives on the resources of the state? That is the chief bastion of economic crime. It is financial crime. Because at the end of the day, the political godfather is looking for something in a manner that is not deserving of him. And if you leave political patronage, you take it beyond the level of party patronage, which should be what will accrue to the members of the political party as members, as supporters, as people who have paid the price and stakeholders. You want to begin to get something for yourself, for your own personal idiosyncrasy. I think it is criminal, very, very much criminal.
All right, Festus Ogwuche, a legal practitioner and expert in international human rights law from Port Harcourt, Rivers State. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Dapo, for your hard-hitting questions. Thank you.